You pay for a mobile ad campaign in Singapore, the dashboard says it is live and spending, and you have no idea what a real customer actually sees when it serves. The numbers look fine, impressions climb, the click rate holds, the spend drains on schedule. But the dashboard is a report about the ad, not the ad itself. And the only way to know your creative landed on the right page, and showed up in the right country is to stand where your customer stands and look. Today I want to explain why ad verification breaks on emulators and fake locations, and why a real phone in the market you are buying is the only honest way to check. I run more than 100 real cloud Android phones in Singapore, genuine Samsung handsets, each on its own persistent Singapore mobile IP and its own real carrier SIM, reachable over an AdDB endpoint with an API to list and lock any phone in the fleet. So here is the verdict upfront. Ad platforms decide what to serve based on where the device really is and what network it sits on. So if you check your Singapore campaign from a laptop pretending to be in Singapore, you are not seeing your campaign, you are seeing whatever the pretense gets served. Let me show you how the serving decision actually works. When an app or a mobile site asks for an ad, it does not just hand over a slot. It sends a small bundle of signals about the device that is asking, and the ad exchange uses those signals to pick a winner in a fraction of a second. The country and city come from the IP and the mobile network. The language, the screen size, the operating system, the app itself all travel along too. The ad you get back is the one that won an auction tuned to exactly that bundle. Change the bundle and you change the ad. The single most load-bearing signal in that bundle is the network. A real Singapore mobile IP on a real carrier tells the exchange plainly that a person in Singapore is asking, a campaign geo-targeted to Singapore will bid on that request and win it. Point the same check at a data center address or a consumer VPN exit, and the exchange sees an office in some other country wearing a Singapore label. Many buyers simply refuse to bid on those addresses at all, because that is exactly where a lot of ad fraud comes from. So your ad never even serves, and you conclude the campaign is broken when the only broken thing was your vantage point. And you cannot paper over that with an emulator either. An emulator has no real telephony stack and no carrier behind it, so the network signal it presents is hollow, and the device signals it sends are the telltale fingerprint of a machine in a data center. Ad exchanges have spent years learning to filter exactly that traffic out, because invalid traffic from emulated devices is one of the oldest forms of ad fraud there is. So an emulator is doubly useless here. It gets filtered as fraud. And even when something does serve, it is not the creative a real handset in Singapore would ever have been shown. So what is it you are actually trying to check? Start with the simplest thing, whether the ad renders at all. A creative that looks perfect in the preview tool can collapse on a real screen. The image loads slowly on a mobile network and the slot shows blank for 2 seconds. The font falls back to something ugly. The call to action sits below the fold on a small phone. The video autoplays without the sound you designed the whole spot around. None of that shows up in the dashboard. All of it shows up the instant you watch the ad serve on a real device held in the market. Then there is what happens after the tap, which is where a lot of money quietly dies. The ad serves, the customer taps, and the landing page has to load. On a real mobile network, in the real country, in a real browser. On a genuine Singapore phone, you follow that whole path. You see the page render, you time how long it takes on a normal 4G connection, you check the offer matches the ad, and you make sure the tracking actually fires. A campaign that serves beautifully and lands on a broken or mismatched page is worse than no campaign, because you are paying for the click and losing the customer at the door. The core job, though, is confirming the geo-targeting is doing what you paid for. If you bought Singapore, you need to see Singapore ads in the language and currency and offer you set, with the local promotions and none of the ones meant for another market. The only way to prove that is to ask for an ad from inside Singapore and read what comes back. A real Singapore mobile IP is not a nice to have for this test. It is the entire test. Everything else is a guess about what the exchange decided on your behalf. There is another side to verification that has nothing to do with your own creative, and that is where your ad ends up. Programmatic buying scatters your ad across thousands of apps and sites you never handpicked, and some of those places you would never want your name next to. The only way to know is to browse the real inventory the way a customer would on a real device and watch what your ad actually sits beside. Sitting next to the wrong content is a brand problem no dashboard will ever warn you about, because the dashboard only knows the ad served, not what surrounded it. And then there is fraud aimed at you. If you are the buyer, you are paying for impressions and clicks, and the whole industry exists to fake both. Some of that shows up as traffic from addresses no real person uses, some as apps that stack invisible ads on top of each other, some as clicks that no human ever made. Watching your placements on real devices in the real market is how you catch the ones that only ever appear to machines. A real phone that behaves like a real customer sees the ecosystem the way your real customers do, which is exactly where the fakery does not hold up. Now, one check on one phone tells you about one moment. Verification is a standing job, because campaigns rotate creatives, budgets shift, and an exchange that served you correctly this morning can serve something wrong this afternoon. This is where a fleet earns its keep. A row of real Singapore phones, each holding its own steady identity, lets you sample your campaign again and again across the day, across different apps, across different carriers, and build a real picture instead of a single lucky snapshot. And the identity staying put matters more than it first sounds. If each phone keeps the same device and the same persistent Singapore mobile IP, then the ads it sees settle into something you can trust and compare over time. A vantage point that jumps between random addresses every hour gets treated as suspicious, gets fed defensive or junk inventory, and gives you readings you cannot line up against yesterday. A stable phone on a stable local network looks like an ordinary Singapore customer, session after session. So what it is served is what an ordinary Singapore customer is served. It also helps that real customers are not all on one phone or one network. Some are on Singtel, some on StarHub, some on M1, some on an older handset, some on the newest one. Ad delivery and rendering can differ across all of those, so a small fleet spread across real carriers and a couple of device types shows you the spread your customers actually live in. That is a matrix you can only build out of genuine phones on genuine SIMs, because the differences you are hunting for are precisely the ones an emulator erases. People always ask whether this has to be done by hand, and the good news is it does not. Because a real cloud phone is reachable over AdB. You can point a script at it, open the app or the mobile site, capture the screen and log what served, on a schedule, across the whole fleet. You can wake 20 phones at 9 in the morning, have each one pull up your campaign, grab a screenshot, and drop the lot into a folder for review. The device on the far end is genuine, so the capture is genuine, but the checking runs like any other automated job. I want to be clear about what this is for, because verification sits right next to some things it should not be used for. This is for checking your own campaigns, your own creatives, your own landing pages, and the inventory you are paying to appear on. It is a transparency tool that lets an honest buyer see what they actually bought. It is not a way to manufacture fake impressions, fake clicks, or fake engagement, and a real device does not make any of that acceptable. The whole value here is that you are finally seeing the truth, so do not turn around and use it to fake one. And a real device does not make ad verification effortless, so let me be fair about the edges. The ad ecosystem is enormous, and you are always sampling a slice of it, never the whole thing. So verification lowers your uncertainty rather than erasing it. There is a little more latency reaching a phone in a rack than one in your hand, and reading served ads at scale still takes real setup. A real phone in the market removes the one thing you cannot fake your way past, which is genuinely being where your customer is. The judgment about what you are looking at is still yours to make. The reason teams do not just keep a drawer of phones on Singapore SIMs for this is that a real device lab is an actual job. Every handset needs a SIM that costs money each month, needs charging without cooking the battery, needs updates, and needs to be reachable from wherever your ad team happens to sit. Do that for 2 phones and it is a weekend of cables. Do it for a fleet across 3 carriers that has to be up whenever a campaign is live, and it is a full-time role that has nothing to do with the campaigns you are trying to run. That is the whole reason cloud.one exists. Real Samsung handsets in Singapore on dedicated hardware, each with its own persistent Singapore mobile IP on a real carrier SIM, Singtel, StarHub, M1 or Vivify. Not an emulator, not a data center address, not a VPN wearing a Singapore label, a genuine phone that sees exactly what a Singapore customer sees because it is one. You reach each one over an AdDB endpoint, list and lock it through an API, and watch the screen live in your browser. Start at cloudf.one and use code YT30 on your first month. So to recap, ad platforms serve based on the real network and location of the device that is asking, so a laptop pretending to be in Singapore only ever shows you what the pretense gets served. A real Singapore mobile IP on a real phone lets you verify that your ad renders, that it geo-targets correctly, that the landing page holds up, that your brand sits in safe company, and that the impressions you are buying are real. An ad campaign only tells you the truth from where your customer is standing. So stand there on a real phone, check what actually serves, and spend on what works. I'll see you in the next one.